Joining us on the line right now is Tucker Carlson from the Daily Caller. He's a big wig over there, and I was watching your website. I was reading your website. I watch it, but I also read it, and I see this story that it just made me angry. It has to do with the Centers for Disease Control, and how you guys were just trying to get some answers from the Centers for Disease Control, an organization that's supposed to give us information about what's going on with diseases. You know, something that everybody needs to know. And it turns out that they were sort of giving you the runaround, and then you guys asked for some emails through a FOIA request and found out that there was an active campaign to not do interviews with conservative organizations.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And they were, first of all, good morning.
Good morning, Tucker.
You guys are remarkably perky for this hour.
We're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, man.
It's so impressive. Yes, much like the IRS, they were self-consciously discerning between news organizations that they thought were politically sympathetic to them and ones they thought weren't. And that's obviously the most basic kind of violation. You know, we're all taxpayers at the federal government, and they were, basically discriminating on the basis of political orientation.
Well, let's name names. The person who that they were referring to was a woman by the name of Karen Hunter, a senior press officer at the federal agency. And when a guy who was handling this press request from the Daily Caller talked to the scientist, he said, well, just lie to them and tell them that you're not available. And this is the quote: Karen gets worked up whenever conservative outlets want to do interviews.
It's the best. It's the best. Because isn't this exactly what you know is going on time after time when you call various agencies? You know this is the conversation that's taking place. And to prove it was like Christmas. It was so nice to see that. And by the way, it was a result just of a FOIA request, Freedom of Information Act request, which, are kind of complicated to file, but in the end worth it because you get stuff like this.
Well, it sure is worth it, Tucker Carlson, because the FOIA request from Judicial Watch is what ultimately brought about this select committee on Benghazi. That email that was revealed there that many people are calling,
which is unbelievable. Yeah. That a congressional committee couldn't get that email,
right?
But a nonprofit could. How does that work?
But as a journalist, as the editor-in-chief of Daily Caller, I want you to hear what Chuck Todd said yesterday. Now, Chuck Todd is the NBC News political director here in Washington, and he is the White House correspondent. And with regard to this committee, he said this.
I'll hear from Republicans that say, but there are unanswered questions. Well, no, all the questions have been answered.
I'm pretty sure you have some reporters on staff there at Daily Caller who could do Chuck Todd's job a little better than him.
Well, you know what? I'll forgive almost any sin in a journalist and have drunkenness, faithlessness, sleepiness, infidelity. I mean,
are you just talking about yesterday, Tucker?
I am literally talking about yesterday. But the one sin I won't forgive in someone who works for me is a lack of curiosity.
Absolutely.
And so it's remarkable the number of journalists who are telling you, you know what, we know everything we need to know. Or that debate's settled. Don't ask questions. It's boorish of you to keep bringing up questions, pesky questions. Really? What are you working for? Are you working? I mean, you sound like a flag. And by the way, there are a bunch of unanswered questions, not all of which I think will help Republicans. For example, I haven't heard any Republican ask the most interesting question of all, which was, what were they doing there?
Yeah.
Why were there 24 CIA contractors in Benghazi, Libya, a town no one in America had even heard of? Why were they there? Apparently they were there moving weapons from Gaddafi's weapons stockpiles to a third country, maybe Turkey, to the Syrian rebels. I don't think Republicans, for whatever reason, are particularly interested in getting to the bottom of that, but they may anyway, just because, that may be an ancillary benefit of this committee that we find out the answer to that. But a journalist shouldn't care who it helps. He should be interested in finding out the truth for its own sake. And so it's very weird when they admit that, it's just not worth asking that question. Really, why?
I've never had much respect for reporters who think that they know it all. There's nothing to learn. No,
well, sure,
that's not a story.
It winds up. I mean, that is in effect carrying water for one side or another. I mean, but you see this on global warming too. The debate is over. Really, don't ask any more questions because science demands that you shut up and accept whatever the status quo consensus is right now. I mean, the whole point of journalism, the whole point of science, is to relentlessly question what we think we know and to push forward for a deeper understanding, for more answers, more data, more information. And anybody who argues against that is arguing against the basic premise of journalism. It's bizarre.
So, Tucker, I mean, I got to ask this then, because you've been in this town for a while. You've been in journalism in Washington for a while. You know these people. When you hear a Chuck Todd say something like that, is it lack of curiosity? Is it bias? Or is it just laziness?
Well, I'm not really sure. I mean, I know Chuck well. I used to work with Chuck. I like Chuck. I've always liked Chuck. And I think he's smart. And, I think he's probably liberal. But I don't, he's certainly not like Rachel Maddow or something. He's not... trying to rip out the basic institutions of American life by the roots and build something new at all. He's not a revolutionary. I really don't know what he meant. I mean, I don't want to think that he was saying that because he thought, that would benefit Democrats. I really don't know. So without specifically referring to Chuck Todd, I would say I've heard other reporters say stuff like that. Oh, that's old news. And that's basically just a talking point. That's the kind of thing that spokesmen say. That's the kind of thing that Jay Carney says. Like, huh? I don't know. I mean, I don't care what your politics are. You ought to, if you're a reporter, always be in favor of more information, period. That's your default position.
Yeah, there's another story I saw in the Daily Caller, because that's where I find a lot of good stuff, that the president is on record yesterday saying that enforcing immigration laws isn't smart. And this comes at a time when we're learning that they have released, some really bad guys while they're awaiting, adjudication of their current immigration status.
It's the best. Lecturing law enforcement officers that enforcing laws is a bad idea because if you enforce laws, then somehow people won't want to obey the laws. This never made sense. This was like the position that public health officials were taking, on communicable diseases that had powerful lobbies behind them. They would say, well, testing for that disease is a bad idea because it will discourage people from getting tested for the disease.
Right.
I mean, it didn't make any sense at all. And, of course, it doesn't have anything to do... Republicans and conservatives make such a huge mistake when they try to engage on the level of, facts and rational discourse. I mean, it's not about that at all.
It's about emotion.
It's purely political. There's a specific constituency being targeted. You know what I mean? I mean, It has nothing to do with enforcing the law. That's a very retro, linear, rational way of looking at it. That's not a 21st century way of looking at this.
Tucker, may I say this may have been your best segment on Mornings on the Mall. We're going to have to call you at 6 a.m. all the time. This is going to be your moment.
I love being up early. You guys are an inspiration. You're so articulate this early.
And by the way, we know that you're often in New York, so could you please take a tip from Alec Baldwin? Don't drive the wrong way down the street in your bicycle.
I'm heading to New York right now, literally right now. I'm going to Union Station in the hope of seeing him. I love that guy.
All right. Thanks, Tucker Carlson.
Thanks, guys.
Tucker and Alec Baldwin, I want to be a part of that.
That would be
party.
a great